The thing that I think is distinct about AI is the amount of upside potential there is.
This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with. This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Greenskies Analytics.
Hello, everybody,
link,
and welcome to the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell. Today on the show, we have Pat Niemann. He's spent 32 years at Ernst & Young, always as an audit professional, but now he is a partner, has been a partner over the Center for Board Matters at Ernst & Young. So he basically hangs out with audit committees all the time and understands what they need. And so you might recall, if you've listened to the show for a while, Pat came on around this time last year also. And so he's kind of our resident, hey, what does the audit committee need to know going into whatever year that is? So in this case, 2024. So there's two overarching topics this year, cybersecurity obviously being one of those, and then the other one being AI, which you probably guessed. Last year, if you listen to the episode, it was largely cybersecurity and ESG. So just a little way of thinking about how the trends have changed. This is how I would listen to the show. If you are an audit committee member, listen to it from the perspective of, do I need to know this, or what do I not know, and what do I need to share with the rest of the board and directors? If you're the CAE and you haven't had these conversations with the audit committee, probably be a good time to do that. If you are not in some kind of leadership position, then it might be good to go, hey, we should probably have these conversations with the CAE or audit leader or whoever that might be. So keep that in mind as you listen through. Here we go. What's in your internet browsing history this week?
So Trent, it might sound a little wonky, but in what I do, there's plenty of browsing on, you name it, AI, artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about that today. Cyber is always a top issue. I think separate from that, my wife and I keep an eye on a few dog rescues that there's some operations where some dogs needed adoption down in Tijuana. We're in Southern California, and we're glad to report those dogs got rescued without us taking a new dog in this time around. And then this is the rainy season where we live in Southern California, so there are lots of checks on weather forecasts and things like that. I think that's pretty accurate if you were looking at my browsing history with me.
All right, perfect. So we're talking AI. Of course, that's one of the overarching topics for today. I feel like when I say these two words in conjunction, that certain people are immediately going to go, nope, I'm not listening to this podcast anymore, because it's just going to be like the buzzwordiest of buzzwords. But agile, and if people hadn't turned it off already, AI, and then governance. I feel like that could be something I could see people be like, oh, God, are we seriously talking agile AI governance already? But why is that so important, especially to audit committees? Why should that be likely a priority for them going into the year?
Yeah. So Trent, you used the word agile twice, I think, and I'm not going to use it again because I just the point is a reasonable one. Companies, boards, internal audit teams need to be flexible. They need to be responsive to what's going on in the business, in the inside and outside the company for that matter. But when you get down to it and you take something like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and you think about, hey, what are the roles of audit committees where I focus most of my time in our firm? When you think about what chief audit executives are focusing on, it's really risk. That at the end of the day is what we collectively focus on. And so when something like artificial intelligence, machine learning, when It's not a new thing, as you well know, as your audience well knows, but has taken on just a much higher level of prominence at companies for a lot of different reasons and a lot of good reasons. And like any technology that is emerging, getting used more, has so much potential. With all of that comes risk. So, why is governance over that technology important? Because of the risk that comes with it. I'd point out a couple of things I see them as specific to AI and machine learning and so forth. I don't think it's going away. This isn't a fad. It's not a flavor of the month. I think AI will continue to increase the role it plays in virtually all businesses. And it's not going to be one size fits all. There's going to be a continuum, but there aren't going to be many companies that aren't utilizing AI, dealing with AI, and looking for the possibilities of AI. And that's the other thing that I would say on why is governance important. In addition to the reasons I mentioned, I think of the upside. And when I deal with corporate directors and audit committee members, and especially audit committee chairs, and why is AI different than some things that have made it onto the radar screen from a risk perspective or just emerging technology perspective? The thing that I think is distinct about AI is the amount of upside potential there is. There are so many possibilities. I know I don't understand all the possibilities. I think even though AI has been around a while, the advancements, we're kind of at this exponential pace right now. And then you think about what's going to happen over the next 5 and 10 and 20 years with AI. And yes, there's risk, but the upside potential, the impact on businesses, the amount of revenue and profits that can be generated through the advancements in AI, I just think, especially when I look at directors and audit committee members, they are very captivated by it and they want to get up to speed, and they're putting a concerted effort in getting up to speed because of that upside. And yes, that also, once again, I'll come back to the risk that is presented by AI. It's very real, and companies, boards, management teams, audit committees need to be assessing and evaluating that risk. But I think those are some of the things that come to mind, that the importance of good governance over AI and machine learning.
And in trying to be practical or give practical advice to the listeners, why should they care about it? And maybe a better way of asking this is, what questions should the audit committee be asking leadership? Should they be asking of their CAE and auditors relative to AI governance? So that whoever's listening has something they can take away and go, hey, CAE, if they're an auditor, they're not an audit committee member or chair, they can go, hey, CAE, are we we should be asking these questions, right? I feel like the AC might want to know this. Like, what questions can we ask?
When it comes to AI, and once again, it's everywhere you look. I mean, I told you it's a top issue for audit committees, no doubt. And I wouldn't have said that to you a year or so ago, right? Things change, they evolve. It's top of the charts right now, and with good reason. But I also think there's a way to really take things out of proportion. So I would just say, even though AI is not at all a simple thing, I'd also say don't overcomplicate things. Try to break it down, try to simplify. And once again, I'd say that to corporate directors and audit committee members. I'd say it to the C-suite management, including the chief audit executive and the whole internal audit team. Simplify it to the extent you can. Fundamentally, when you think about what is AI, it's an emerging technology. And even though it's been around a while, it is changing rapidly. The uses are expanding at a very fast pace. So I always encourage audit committees, directors, and management teams treat it as you would, what would you do if you were implementing a new technology at the company? And how would you approach it? And not that any two technologies are exactly the same or you'd approach things exactly, the same way. I would say, think about that and how would you approach it? And I think most CAEs in our audience and for that matter, just C-suite executives in general, probably have a pretty good approach to emerging technologies. When something's new, especially when they come with risk, and any emerging new technology does, I think I would look at it in a similar way and approach it in a similar way to other technologies. When you think of questions, for one thing, I'm glad that's your question. What questions should be asked? Because I think questions are just really, really important. And once again, I work with audit committees and boards, but I think all the way through the organization, asking questions about the use of AI has a lot of importance. When I talk to audit committees, one of the things I say is, get an inventory. Where is AI being utilized in the company? That's important. And so thinking through the lens of a chief audit executive, that's an important question. And it's a very fundamental, very simple one, but let's get the list together. Let's know where we are using AI. From a board perspective, and I think, once again, this has importance to chief audit executives, certainly CEOs, CFOs, and others. But I think it's a basic question that's important. If we are using AI, does it align with our strategy? Does it align with our priorities? Is it, consistent with where we're trying to take the company, as opposed to we're just trying out something new because it is new and people are talking about this AI thing. So I think just understanding, asking those questions, that's important. I would also say, are there material implications to our business? And material, yes, quantitatively material, but also think about qualitatively, is it material? And that can be a very ambiguous evaluation and thought process and discussion. But think about, is it material, or is it just in some small corner of the company and we're not using it in a very significant way? And by the way, if it's not being used in a material way or having a material impact on the company, you might ask the question, why are we using it at all? Why are we dabbling in this? And there could be good reasons and maybe not. And then one more point that I think is important, once again, for audit committees for sure, for boards, for the C-suite and chief audit executives included, are there financial reporting implications? And not that the role of a CAE and an internal audit department are typically exclusively financial, but if there are financial reporting implications, that's important to know, once again, in that inventory that I talked about. And then that starts a whole nother analysis of if AI is having impact on financial reporting, then what are the internal controls around that? Who are the key players? Who's in charge? How can changes be made? They're just all kinds of things. Once again, not any different than any other technology that's being used by a company, particularly when it comes to financial reporting. But that's an important assessment. And by the way, it's why audit committees are interested in this. They are interested in the opportunities in the business and the operations of their companies, but they also are paying attention. How is this impacting financial reporting, what we disclose, what we report, how we generate and report revenue and costs and things like that? So those are some things that come to mind, Trent, as you think about and our audience thinks about, what should we be thinking about? What should we be asking about?
I like a lot of what you said. I think there's a couple things, though, I wanted to mention. One is differentiating between, okay, are we using AI, which probably everyone is to some degree, ChatGPT, Copilot, et cetera, and risks associated to that, opportunities associated to that. But then also, are we developing AI tools? And I think that's really important because we have things like bias that's in the data. And so you definitely don't want to develop a product that is going to have some level of bias in it that's ultimately going to be bad for the organization. So making sure that you have controls along the, basically, I'll just call the development life cycle of the AI tool that you're developing. And so you might have to kind of split resources on, okay, which one are we going to focus on depending on the size of your organization and if you are developing AI related tools. So that's something that I think is an important distinction. The other thing that I really like that you said is about ultimately, okay, we're using this stuff, right? Right. All right. Does it align to the strategy? Nope. Okay. Why are we using it then? And it's interesting to see history play itself out again, because I know with data and analytics, that happened too, where it's just like, we need to start using analytics because that's what we're supposed to be using. And then a year goes by and you go, what'd you do with it? And they went, we spent a lot of money on it, but we know nothing. And we didn't, did you have a business case that you were tying it to, your strategy? And they go, well, we really think about that. We just thought we were supposed to get all the data. So I'm a huge fan of like, what's the strategy? We audit against that. So especially as that all kind of ties into AI. All right, so we're talking cybersecurity. I think it's a good time to transition into a cybersecurity conversation as we kind of start to close out the second overarching theme of the episode. And this is related to cybersecurity relative to the SEC rules, largely around materiality. Is it not? But I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. And really, again, your perspective in working with audit committees. What do they need to know relative to the new SEC rules and how that's going to impact future disclosures?
Yeah, so the new SEC rules on cyber disclosure, they're upon us. A lot of public companies are going through their first cycle with the new rules that kicked in effectively in December of 2023. So I always think it's important, Trent, to talk about not so much deep details of what the requirements are, but I personally find it helpful just to break it down a little bit, what is being required. And that there are two big buckets, if you will. One is in your annual report, that's 10K for most public companies. There's also a Form 20F for foreign private issuers. And in my 32 plus years as an audit professional, I've never served a client that had a 20F, but 10Ks are what you'd normally think about. That's one set of requirements and disclosure. And then the other is what I'd refer to as incident reporting. So material events, those are covered under 8K disclosures when the events happen. So 10K is on an annual basis, 8K are when incidents occur, or once again, the 8K equivalent for foreign private issuers is at 6K. So when you think about the annual reporting and these, you will see, our audience is seeing companies are including their first set of disclosures on cybersecurity right now. And so what you can count on, I think, is a few things. One, the SEC is observing what registrants are disclosing. I think you can also count on registrants are observing what other registrants are disclosing. And I think many companies out there can just expect some help from the SEC, some comment letters to come. I don't think that needs to be viewed as something that is meant to be critical or problematic, but I think the SEC, we're early stage on these requirements. And the reality is there is going to be a learning process. There's going to be an evolution. Companies will better understand the expectations, the norms, what companies like them are disclosing or are not disclosing. We're already seeing there's a variety in what gets disclosed, how it gets disclosed, the length of those disclosures. And even though everything that I've seen Trent and our firm is looking at, I can't point to any company that's made these disclosures in their 10Ks that is not complying with the new rules. I think they are, but like anything, they're going to be doing it in slightly different ways. And I think this is not a bad thing. It can actually be healthy to, over time, get the most useful information in those disclosures. And so I think companies are involving the right people is super important, and I encourage that. General counsel, outside counsel, they're almost always included in drafting these disclosures. The 10K, at the end of the day, is a legal document, and so that's an important set of inputs. I think clearly the right people at the company need to be involved. I think clearly audit committees and boards need to weigh in, because they're often sitting on multiple audit committees and boards, and they have perspective from other places. And of course, don't forget audit, and that's internal audit and external audit, because there is perspective there. There is the consideration of risk that we as auditors always have top of mind. And I think management, general counsel, and boards do too, but I think the audit lens is an important one. And one thing that I just encourage companies to keep in mind in these 10K disclosures, these annual reporting disclosures, Gary Gensler, the chair of the SEC, some of the things he points out is important, not exact words, but he's looking to protect investors and maintain orderly markets. And if you can sort of think of it in those terms, these disclosures, I think companies will approach it in the most productive way and the most constructive way, and ultimately be compliant, not just with the letter of the law, but the spirit of the rules. And I'm not one to take a position. Are the rules great rules or not great rules? That's not my role. But I would say, if you just keep in mind what the chair of the SEC says is the spirit of these rules and others, that I think that can be helpful. If I shift gears to the periodic reporting, the incident reporting in 8Ks or 6Ks, this is where a material cybersecurity incident is required to be reported within 4 business days of determining that the incident is material. And there are a few things that get really challenging in these requirements, Trent, and there's no bright lines that I can point to, no crisp evaluation or assessment. These are going to be challenging assessments that incorporate a number of factors and variables. The most basic is, hey, what's material, right? And quantitative materiality comes into play. Qualitative materiality comes into play. 4 days is an interesting requirement. And there's a study that I've seen from IBM in 2022, and it talks about, on average, in 2022, cyber breaches, when they exist, were not detected for the data point is 207 days after the breach had occurred. So there are a whole lot of issues there. This is fraught with challenges, and to be precise and perfect will be challenging. But the reality is companies are going to have to do their best. And when you do determine that an incident has occurred, that's when the clock starts. Actually, it's when, not just when you determine there's an incident, but you've determined that it's material. And companies are going to have to put forward their best effort to make that evaluation quickly and thoughtfully. There's another challenge here that companies might have a series of related unauthorized occurrences, breaches. And so that's just a whole nother thing to keep awareness of, that you might have one incident that is individually not material, but it's related to other incidents that have occurred that collectively and in aggregate, they amount to a material breach, and that will trigger a disclosure requirement. So, those are a lot of challenges. I'm raising them because I think the awareness is the most important thing. Once again, dealing with audit committees, those are the things that I point out. I think with CAEs and their internal and corporate audit teams, I think the awareness is really important because one, they have eyes and ears around the company. They see and understand what goes on in the business, but also that the CAEs and their teams have that risk lens and understanding what's in place at companies to detect in a timely fashion when there are incidents. And not just that, but are they being communicated to the right people in the company, right? To get the evaluation going, have the right discussion. And there are a lot of people that play a role here, Trent. It's clearly, this has to get to general counsel, your CISOs and CIOs and their security departments and teams in general are going to have a front and center role, but it's so important to bring in, I think internal audit needs to have a seat at the table. I think that is a high priority. And they're going to be, there's going to be a time in the process where that's appropriate and when that's appropriate. I think including the external auditor, the independent auditor has importance at the right time in the process. All of those people and others having a seat at the table, and the board and audit committees. And the reason I bring up audit committees when it ties to cyber is our firm EY has a survey we do each year, and amongst Fortune 100 disclosures, SEC disclosures, and in our 2023 analysis, 75% of Fortune 100 companies reported that cybersecurity is within the purview and overseen by the audit committee, as opposed to the full board or another committee. So audit committees, and that's Fortune 100. I think that trend holds more broadly than that as well at, other companies, other SEC registrants. So I think bringing all those people in, having an approach before you have the incident gets really important, so that the 8K reporting requirements under these new SEC rules are dealt with in the most responsible way. And once again, hey, companies have to comply with the letter of the law, but I think understanding the spirit of the law and the requirements has importance, which once again is just trying to get investors information in a timely and orderly manner, and maintaining orderly markets. If you keep that top of mind, you might approach it in the most productive manner, I would suggest.
So I can definitely see amongst CISOs, amongst general counsel, amongst CAEs and external auditors, when it comes to these disclosures, that the CISO goes, hey, we did our part, but this is a finance thing, so audit, it's for you to figure out. And audit going, it's really more of a cyber thing, so you go do it and you own it. It's your thing. And this kind of internal battle of like who ultimately owns this and who's responsible, as a way of saying it. I could see that battle kind of playing out amongst a lot of organizations. So I wanted to get your thoughts there, what you've seen already, what seems to be working there, and just any guidance in general that you could pass along to the listeners.
Trent, that is such an important focal point for companies because, hey, we are early stage. And one of the most challenging things in these new rules is how to interpret the materiality concept. And it's not overly prescribed just yet. But what I would say is whether they're battles amongst management teams and so forth, or perhaps even more concerning, the team not knowing who's doing what is maybe even a bigger concern. And so when I think about it, and as I talk to audit committees, boards, and management teams, I think the most important thing is, one, you have to have a plan. You have to have protocols in advance. Some companies have this because there have been incidents in the past, lots of them at lots of companies. So you need to know how to react. Now there's a requirement to be disclosing this in a different way to the public in an SEC document and filing. So there are certain people that just have to be a part of this. And yes, it's going to be CISOs and CIOs. Yes, it's going to be general counsel. They're going to be the finance team, CFOs and their teams clearly. I think the most important thing is getting the process in place, understanding the qualitative issues that need to be focused upon, who needs to weigh in on that at the company. And then on the quantitative side, it's not just who does the calculation and the evaluation, but what is that calculation? What is that evaluation? And we're all learning as we go here. I don't know that a lot of companies really have nailed this. And I don't suspect many companies are doing it exactly how they're doing it now is exactly how they're going to be doing it in a year or two, because everybody's going to learn. There's going to be more interpretive guidance, I hope, from the SEC. I hope from firms like ours as we learn. But one thing that I do strongly suggest, talk to people outside your company. And often some advisor is going to be necessary on this front because they are working with different companies trying to get that right. And yes, that's outside counsel in many cases from a legal perspective, but there are, I think, assistance on how do we look at materiality? How are companies approaching these calculations and who should be involved? Those are just really, really important factors in getting this all right. And by the way, be ready to roll with things as we all learn more on this. So, and Trent, I've enjoyed this discussion. I certainly hope that you and our audience has learned something, gotten some valuable points out of this. I would just say in closing, these topics can get really wonky and I think even misunderstood when you throw around topics like cyber, like data privacy, like AI. And what I just always encourage and what I think is most important is the awareness. Not, most of our audience, me in my role, you in your role, I'm not trying to be a deep expert, and I don't think most of us need to, but in all of our roles, we need to know what's out there, know what the risks are, know what to stay aware of. And I think if especially when I think about CAEs and their internal audit, corporate audit teams, I think if people stay focused on that, what's out there, what are the risks that get presented by these concepts and these technologies and so forth, I think everybody's going to do their job better, and they'll be addressing the most important things about these lofty topics as they execute in their roles. So, Trent, thanks for having me. It's always nice to be with you and this audience, and I hope I get to come back again at some point in the future.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.